first level, right, arousal from above, the gift is falling in love, but it's a true experience of love. It holds what's possible. There's a submission. The second level, right, individuation, where we snap back into our individual selves. You want to go to a movie? Sure, which one? Let's talk about it. Anchorage, not happening so fast. I don't think so, right? I reclaim my individuality, and then as a full autonomous being, we then re-merge at a higher level, not in fusion, but in union, right, at level 3. It's a completely different dance. Now, let me now say it again in a whole different way in terms of Eros. So, let's talk about sexuality for a second. Let's talk about reading a text. Let's talk about any level 1 experience. Let me actually leave sexuality aside for a second. Let me just talk for a second just about reading a text. I don't know how many people here know what I mean when I say reading a text. You may know it from literature if you loved Shakespeare. You may have studied, done Lectio Divina and studying, sacred text. You may have studied a Kabbalistic text. You may have studied a koan, right? But there's an art to studying a text. And the first level of studying a text is, if you know a text, I've lived my life in making love to texts. Right? That's what's called in the Zohar, to make love to a text. Mm-hmm. The first level of making love to a text is you submit. You don't criticize the text, you don't say anything clever about the text, you don't have anything to say, you just read it. You just read it and you bow as you read it. Right? Complete, absolute, radical submission to the text. Now, fundamentalism starts, right, when you arrest at a particular level of development. You arrest at this level, right? And you arrest at level 1, which is reverence and submission to the text. That's called fundamentalism. That's not that it's a bad level. Fundamentalism wouldn't have the power it has. Bush wouldn't have won the election, right? If it didn't have power. It has enormous power. It's a stunning divine moment of consciousness, complete radical submission to the text. But it's a level of consciousness, and like any level, whether it's oral retentive or anal retentive, if you get arrested at that level, right, you have a distortion. But the first level is you read the text, you read the poetry, you read the biblical verse, you read the koan, you read, right, John, right, and you just bow. When I read a text the first time, I'll sit, with my students and we'll read the text, 10, 15 times out loud, and no one's allowed to comment on the text because we're not interested in your comments. Right? It's a complete ego nullification. I bow before the text, complete achna'ah, complete submission to the text. Okay? What happens then is, slowly, the ego disappears from the room. Right? Slowly, and it's a beautiful process, slowly, the need to say something, right, that we all have, right, to be wise, to cleverly analyze the text, to see, it's all gone. You just read the text. Level 2, havdalah, meaning I'm no longer just reading the text. I have moved from fundamentalism in the third person, giving it a third person description, to, let's say, academia. It's a second person description, like a third person description, meaning I'm going to analyze the text. What are the structures of the text? How does a word come up very often? So let's say I'm reading the book of Genesis. So I'll notice in the book of Genesis, this is part of the source code of Genesis. You can read the book your entire life. Don't have the source code, you don't have the book. Source code, you notice, source code observation, that there are 7 people in the book of Genesis who travel east. 7 stories of people traveling east. 6 of them don't return. When you travel east in the book of Genesis, it means you're out of the story, you're gone. You're read out of the story. One of them goes east and returns, that's Jacob. It's how you can go east and return. That's what the whole book's about. Okay? But without explaining the depth of it, that's just a source code observation. That's a structural level 2 observation. I notice that there's 7 stories of people going east. I'm no longer reading it. I'm noticing something structural in the text. I'm not interpreting it, but I'm saying something's happening here. There's something going on here. I notice the structure. I see it clearly. I begin to see, right, the structure of the koan. I begin to feel into it. Right? Yes? Are you just stretching your hand?
No, I want to just drop something in really fast. I just realized that you're also describing what we called learning yesterday. It's Eros, but you start out one with the text, you merge with the text, then you separate, it becomes object, right? And then the third level is the integration. It's the same exact thing.
Right. I was going to come to that a little later, but now that you said it earlier.
He does that all the time.
She's impossible. Okay, so
Hard to go deep.
I'm at level 2 right now.
so what happens is, so at level two, right? So I analyze the structures, right? And let me say it actually, the way Dee said it is very, very beautiful. I'm just going to slightly calibrate it, okay? And it's at level 1, right? It's not quite that you're one with the text. You're actually more as God in the second person. You're actually, right, you're bowing before the text. It's more devotion to the text, right, in this system. I'm devoted to the text. I'm reverential to the text, right? It's a reverential second person. Then, at level 2, I move into third person. I stand against the text. I look at the textual structures. That's separation, individuation. And then, at level 3, there's what's called the zivug with the shechina, right? The complete erotic merger with the text. Borrowing Dee's phrase, right? I become one with the text, and the text begins to speak through me. The text begins to speak through me. And that's the beginning of what we call evolutionary enlightenment. Torah, the word Torah, the Hebrew word for Dharma, means light, enlightened. It's an enlightened state. Ha'ara, Torah, means enlightenment. There's the original text, but there's an ongoing revelation in which revelation ultimately speaks through me. Right? It evolves, and it evolves through my unique self. I merge with the text, and I can say the sweetest, most gorgeous, most stunning thing, and I can understand the word of the divine in a way that Buddha didn't, in a way that Moses didn't, right? Because I've evolved the text. I've merged with the text, and there's no longer a separation, subject-object, between me and the text. I am the text. Nachman of Breslov says, he says, how can you create new Torah? Torah meaning Dharma. Isn't Torah the word of God? How can you create a new word of God? So he says, by the rivers of Babylon, there we dwelt and there we wept. He says, if you weep first, if you cry first, then out of the tears you can create new Torah. Because what crying does is, right, it waters the soul. Right, borrowing Dee's phrase from this morning and the beautiful meditation, right, and it allows the soul to emerge and get transparent and clean. There's nothing between me and the divine. I begin to speak the word of God. Right, the divine speaks through me. That's level 3. Now, here's the danger. The danger is skipping steps. Right? Level 3 is eros. Level 3 is the complete merger oneness. Right? But if you skip steps, right, in a consumer society, right, let's get a quick experience. I want to get right to sweetness. Because why would I want to, right? Why would I want to spend all that time, right, at kind of the submission stage? And certainly why would I want to spend all the time at the individuation, right, trouble stage? I want to get right to level 3. I want to get right to sweetness, right? But if I skip steps, right, the spiritual bypass that we invoked yesterday, right, Wellwood's phrase, right, then what happens is ultimately I don't have a container. I don't have a container, it doesn't hold, right? And if the light goes into the vessel, in the primordial image of Luria and the Kabbalah, the vessel shattered. The vessel shattered.
Mark, it's kind of what you're talking about parallels my experience recently over 40 years with Christianity. And first I had the submission, after falling in love, and boom, then I got into the belly of the beast, or if you will, and I had to deconstruct it and leave it, go away, and come back. And just recently I returned, and it's like it's a new sweetness. There's a new level of understanding where all the stuff that I rejected before has a new translucence, and everything comes together. And the old text that I knew now has a new meaning and a new light, and it's all just kind of coming together at a completely different level.
Gorgeous. It's those 3 levels.
Yeah.
It's those 3 levels. It's those 3 levels. Right? Now, when we talk about eros and sexuality, we also play with those 3 levels. The first level of sexuality is submission. And submission works in one, of 2 ways. Right? The first way submission works is we submit. Right? The child, Freud already pointed out the child is sexual, and the child submits, right, to the child's sexuality. Right? There's a submission. Right? Or a submission might be we submit appropriately, right, to the laws that govern sexuality. Right? That's